our 7th annual summit, so thank you for joining us. I wanted to welcome you all. My name is Lizzie Gaver. I'm the Executive Director of Keep Knoxville Beautiful, who is putting on this summit, in case you weren't aware. I have a feeling most of you were. But I wanted to give a little background on why we have this. So at Keep Knoxville Beautiful, our mission is to inspire and empower Knox County communities to improve their quality of life through beautification and environmental stewardship. And so way back in the day, in 1982, Keep Knoxville Beautiful during the World's Fair held a charrette with local changemakers, city, county, planning, chamber of commerce to talk about, it was called Knox 2000, a vision of the future. So what do we want Knoxville to look like in the year 2000? Obviously we're a little past that now, but for our 40th anniversary, the KKB staff and board decided that we wanted to bring back that kind of idea of getting people together, getting them thinking about cool ideas and ways we can improve our community. And thus the summit was born. So that was about 7 years ago now. And we are this year talking about placemaking, and it's called Rooted in Place. It's a very cute design by one of our board members, Megan. And in case you weren't doing the math, that means we're 47 years old. That means we have a 50th anniversary coming up, if anybody cares about that for any reason. I know I do. But if you guys want to get involved in helping us plan to celebrate our 50th anniversary, we would love to have you, so feel free to reach out to any KKB board or staff member. I also wanted to take a minute to say thank you to our sponsors for this event, because we are able to keep this such a low-cost, accessible event for you all to come and join us and learn because of our sponsors. We would not be able to do this without our sponsors. So I want to take a minute and thank WM, who's here. We have Barbara McMurray, Architects. We have Beasley Landscape Architects. We have Hedstrom Landscape Architecture, Sesco Lighting, and Yes Knoxville. So can we give a round of applause? And also the City of Knoxville Office of Neighborhood Empowerment. They weren't on my list, but they were also a sponsor for this event, so thank you so much, everybody. So also something that we like to do at the beginning of fancy fun events like this is to call out special people in the audience, like elected officials, things like that. And so I started looking through the guest list and realized that every single person here is important to KKB in some way, shape, or form. So I do want to say thank you to the elected officials that are here, but also to everybody else who is organization leaders. We have so many city and county representatives here. We have so many Adopt a Road group leaders, volunteers with us, businesses that work with us, community members, neighborhood leaders. So, and of course, Jenna Bailey, my friends. But I just want to say thank you so much to everybody who's here, and our sponsors for other events too, and other programs that we have are also in the room with us. So I want to say thank you again so much to everybody. And you guys are all here because you are the perfect people to be in this room and learn about placemaking. We were looking through this, and we have architects, landscape architects, we have planners. The reason I'm calling out those three is because you all are eligible for continuing education credit if you so desire. So if you did not see that at check-in and you are an architect, landscape architect, or a planner, then you can hit up the KKB table and sign in, and we'll get you some continuing ed credits. So I know that's not always why you guys are here, but it is a nice little bonus if you're here. So next I want to introduce our MC for the day. It's not going to be me, thank goodness. So Ben Epperson has been doing placemaking work here in Knoxville for over 15 years. He worked at Beardsley Community Farm, the Knox County Health Department, the Planning Department, Great Schools Partnership, and he even started his own playground company. It was Timberdoodle, I think. I've known Ben since 2019, but he barely remembers me from back then. But I also worked at Great Schools Partnership right as he was leaving. But he was someone that came to mind when we were thinking about placemaking in Knoxville, and I was like, we want someone who can really help tie this all together, and Ben is that person. So I'm really excited that he agreed. He now works at the city, so in the city's amazing Office of Urban Design and Development, and they're the ones in charge of placemaking for the city. So we also have representatives from them, which is really cool. I'm really excited for you guys to hear all our presentations today. Without further ado, Ben Epperson.
Welcome to the Placemaking Summit 2026. Hey guys, my name's Ben. I know a lot of you, and I've gotten to meet some of you today. We've got rad speakers. I am stoked to introduce all of them and to hear and see their presentations. We are people, and we've got people in needs. So first off, the bathrooms are through this door, right? They're at if you walk out the door, they're at about 11 o'clock, right there. We've got coffee. Of course, the coffee is provided by K-Brew. Thank you, K-Brew, for that. We've also got water. This is just regular water. For those who don't know, this doesn't have bubbles or booze or anything. This is just good water. So you can drink that. There's sodas in the back. We've got partner tables. Some of our sponsors and partners have cool stuff over here, so check that out. And then this is a waste-free, or not waste-free, nothing is waste-free. This is a low-waste event. So we're gonna try and make this as low waste as possible. So at lunch, I'm gonna release us for lunch like I would an airplane, kind of. So just listen to the lunch instructions. But the other lunch instructions are, please dispose of cans in our clear recycling bins. Here's something weird. If you have not finished your drink, I want you to pour it in this bucket. Okay, so there's a bucket over here, and there's a bucket over there. And then we are composting a lot. So all of your food, your utensil packet, this whole thing is compostable. So that can go in the compost. And then your coffee cups, your coffee lids, and your sugar packets are all also compostable. Anything else, you probably brought with you, and you just need to throw that away. Composting, bathrooms, low waste event. Oh, we've got waste warriors. We've got waste ambassadors here. Raise your hands, Maya and Mackenzie. Maya. You're going to probably be over here at the waste stations, so if you have questions, it's not going to be complicated. I don't even have to say this. They know the stuff better than I do. So, there's Keep Knoxville sweatshirts for sale. I see some people wearing them already. Sweatshirts are for sale over here at this table. So check out these tables in the back. Sesco Lighting has provided these cute little planters. They've got coir and seeds and stuff in there, and then Yes, Knoxville's got stuff. Waste Management has stuff. So grab the cool stuff. And I'm also going to be your timekeeper. So we are 5 minutes behind. But before we start, and before I introduce Haley, I want to say this about placemaking. So today we're going to talk about the built environment. We're going to talk about investing. We're going to talk about civic responsibility. We're going to talk about safety. We're going to talk about art. But what I want you to hear in each of our presenters and our panel discussions is the people. So we do placemaking because of people. So I'm a person. You all seem to be people. So we are trying to make places better for people. And that's what we do in the Office of Urban Design and Development. That's what the city here is about. That's what all these partners, and that's what you are about. So I want you to think about not only how I can engage in a very messy human way with the people in these spaces that I'm trying to change. How can I bring in new people? How can I engage with people who look different from me, who may act or believe or think or vote differently from me? So keep your ears open for the people-y parts of these places and placemaking endeavors that we're talking about. And without further ado, I want to introduce Haley Howard. She's with the Office of Neighborhood Empowerment, who's helping make this possible today. This is Katie. She's pulling up the slides. So Haley's the Assistant Neighborhood Coordinator for the City of Knoxville's Office of Neighborhood Empowerment, and she supports efforts to improve communication, coordination, and accountability between neighborhoods and city departments. So she's that go-between person. Thank you so much for your work. She focuses on collaborative problem solving between city and civic folks. She addresses issues of shared concern across the city. And she's currently overseeing the Neighborhood Small Grants Program, which makes kind of mid-level, small-level placemaking endeavors possible. So without further ado, give it up for Haley Howard.
Hello, hello.
Okay, incredible. Thank you so much, Ben, for that kind introduction. As he said, I'm Haley Howard with the Office of Neighborhood Empowerment. Is this super echoey? It sounds kind of weird up here. Does it sound normal down there? Okay, fantastic. Okay, so I'm going to be talking about placemaking kind of on the neighborhood level, so just keep that in mind. I've been with the Office of Neighborhood Empowerment since 2020. I interned there for a year before I was hired on. And since I got hired on, I have been managing the Neighborhood Small Grants Program, which is kind of where placemaking comes in for our office. So what is placemaking? Placemaking is a multifaceted approach to the planning, design, and management of public spaces. Placemaking capitalizes on a local community's assets, inspiration, and potential with the intent of creating public spaces that promote people's health, happiness, and well-being. Placemaking inspires people to collectively reimagine and reinvent public spaces. The whole goal is to maximize shared value. Placemaking facilitates creative patterns of use, paying particular attention to the physical, cultural, and social identities that define a place and support its ongoing evolution. And placemaking is centered around observing, listening to, and asking questions of the people who live, work, and play in a particular space in order to understand their needs and aspirations for the space and for the community as a whole. So like Ben said, placemaking is truly about the people who live there and use the space. So I want to engage with you all for a few minutes. So what do you all think makes a great place?
Knoxville.
Knoxville's an awesome place. I've lived here my whole life. Love it. And it only gets better, it seems. What were you going to say?
Art.
Art. Okay, great.
Accessibility.
Accessibility.
Free to exist in.
Yes, free to exist in.
People.
People, of course.
I was gonna say community.
Community.
Outdoor connection.
Outdoor connection, yes.
Activities.
Activities.
Safe.
Safe, absolutely.
Good food.
Yes, we love food, Janice, yes. Bringing it back to food, I love it. Anybody else?
Connectivity.
Connectivity.
The landscape around an area that makes it inviting.
Oh, absolutely.
Beauty.
Sidewalks and bike lanes.
Yes, sidewalks and bike lanes.
The climate.
The climate, yes, if it's too cold, it's miserable like it is today.
Beauty.
Beauty. Anybody else?
Diversity.
Diversity, I like that.
Animals and other species.
Yes. I'm a big animal lover. Jack?
Activated streets.
Activated streets. Anybody else want to share what they think makes a great place?
Family.
Family, yeah, the people that we love.
Good architecture.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Architecture,
Opportunity.
yes, opportunity.
Looking out for each other.
Mhm. I think just a sense of belonging makes a place great. Okay, okay, it's back. Sorry. Technology, y'all, it's awful. All right. So there are some key principles to placemaking. Okay, maybe I'll just use the podium.
Yep.
Can you all hear me now?
Nope.
Okay.
Nope, it's muted.
So, I'm so sorry. I'm the guinea pig for the technology today. So there are key principles to placemaking. So we're going to go through those. Number one, the community is the expert. You want to identify the talents and assets in the community when designing a space. You want to create a place and not so much a design. Sometimes the best places are not the most aesthetically pleasing. It's a place that embodies all those things that we just talked about. You want to look for partners. This is definitely going to help sustain the project, whether that be with maintenance or volunteering to help get the project off the ground. Having partners is absolutely crucial. It also helps with buy-in. The more people who are involved and believe in a project, the better. You want to sit back and observe. So how are people using public spaces currently? Why are people not using certain spaces? What do people like and dislike about these spaces? You can use these things to learn and hopefully create a space that works for everyone. And you also want to have a vision. But again, this needs to come from the neighbors, and this place should instill a sense of pride. This isn't about the designer, this isn't about city staff, this isn't about anybody but the community it's supposed to serve. Technology. Okay. You want to focus on lighter, quicker, and cheaper. Short-term improvements can be refined and added to over many years. I'm going to talk about a real-life example toward the end of my presentation that is the perfect example of this. And my intern, Kristen, here, she actually lives in that neighborhood. And actually, some of you might live in the neighborhood where this took place, or is currently taking place, I guess I should say. You want to triangulate. So you want to arrange elements in the space in a way that naturally brings people together. I'm having a hard time coming up with an example on the spot, but some things, if it's just there by itself, it's like, that doesn't make any sense. Why is that there? But if you add a couple of other elements, it's like, oh, these things, it makes sense to pair these things together. Form supports function, and you want to create adaptable public spaces. So a good public space is going to respond to the needs and opinions of the community, and it's going to be open to the need for change later on. So you want your place to be flexible. So I'm going to go over just some examples of placemaking. A lot of these aren't here in Knoxville, but I would love to bring them to Knoxville. So cough, cough. These are parklets. These are small seating areas or green spaces that are usually created along a sidewalk. They can also be in former roadside parking spaces. I think these are super fun. Again, these aren't in Knoxville, but I think these are awesome, and maybe we should bring them to Knoxville. These are alley activations. I'm sure the one in the upper left-hand corner reminds you, or you've been there. You've got the Dolly Parton mural, you've got the bistro lights in the alley. This draws a lot of people. Every time I'm downtown, I constantly see people in this alley taking pictures with the murals. It obviously feels a lot safer than I'd say it used to before these improvements were made. If you look in the right corner, you can see a before and after of another alley. Again, this isn't in Knoxville. But hardly anybody's using it before. It looks maybe a little unsafe, not inviting at all. And then on the right, you see that maybe they've done some paint the pavement, they've added planters. Plants make a great space. I don't think anybody said plants, but I love plants. And they've also added some seating, so much more inviting than it used to be. And then in the bottom right-hand corner, you can see that, again, seating was added, and then plants. That leads to paint the pavement. So I love paint the pavement projects. A couple of years ago, I went to the Safe Routes to School National Conference in Colorado. They've done a lot of paint the pavement projects out there. They're absolutely beautiful. They involve the community, and it's made the streets a lot safer. It just draws attention to certain areas where people are already crossing. So I know it's not technically like a crosswalk, but it still draws attention to where it's needed. Again, you can bring the community into this. These aren't formal crosswalks, but people have painted them to, again, draw attention to those spaces where it's needed. And then if you look over to the right-hand corner, you can see that 3D mural, which I think is really, really cool. I've seen a lot of videos online where people actually think that they're gonna fall, and it's pretty funny. But these murals definitely bring people together, and people love them. Community gardens. We actually have several of these here in Knoxville. Oh gosh. Okay, community gardens. We have several of these in Knoxville, especially for people who live in apartments and things like that. They can't have their own garden. These are wonderful. I'm going to speed it up so we stay on time. Playground and park improvements. These are really cool. These can be really engaging. Murals. These probably look familiar to you. One's on Cumberland, and then the other is in the Burlington neighborhood. That area was not used at all, and now it's used for neighborhood meetings and other things. Improved and unique seating areas and public spaces. You can see that these things are pretty simple, but people are using them. It brings people together. These are cheap, these are easy, not hard to do. Flower plantings. You look to the right, you see the ugly electronic utility looking stuff, and then they planted some flowers. It looks much better. And then you have the vacant lot in the bottom right hand corner that they then replace with sunflower seeds, and now it's beautiful. Neighborhood signs. These are all throughout Knoxville. Our office can help get these installed. We would love to help you with that. Gentrification concerns. Obviously, when a place is value, when people love a place, it increases the value. There's no doubt that there is a relationship there. However, we don't think that the status quo of blight should be the norm or expected to prevent gentrification. We want to use placemaking to enable citizens to create their own public spaces, to highlight the unique strengths of their neighborhoods, and to address its specific challenges. Placemaking is about inclusion and shared community ownership, and gentrification divides. So there are some differences. So the Neighborhood Small Grants Program. So you might have an idea and you're like, oh, well, that's all sunshine and rainbows, but we don't have any money to do it. There is money available. So if you live within the boundaries of a registered neighborhood organization, or maybe you don't, say you don't live in a neighborhood that's registered with our office, it's not hard to do. You would contact Debbie Sharp. We would start the paperwork. It's not very difficult. Jack can attest to this. He's been through it. There's several others who have also been through this process. It's not hard, but it opens you up to grant funding. So if you're a registered neighborhood organization, you can apply for up to $5,000 a year to support these types of projects. If you partner with another neighborhood organization or a nonprofit in the area and you've been through the process before, and you submit all your documentation on time, you can apply for up to $6,500 per year. As long as it brings people together for the greater good of the community, this funding can be used for just about everything. There are some rules and regulations, but I walk people through this process all the time, and I'd be more than happy to help you. So just know that there is funding available for these projects. To be eligible to apply, again, you have to be registered with our office, and you have to attend one of the 3 mandatory workshops in the spring. Those are happening in May. So if you would like to sign up for those, please reach out to me. If you attend the workshop and decide not to apply, that's totally fine, but we would love to see you there. Okay, and this is the true life example that I really want to highlight. This is where Arlington Garden currently sits. This is located on the corner of North Broadway and Emeryland Boulevard, but this was formerly the site of the Pizza Hut. So if you were driving down Broadway, if for those of you all who have grown up here or have lived here for a long time, I'm sure you remember the Pizza Hut. Anyways, the city of Knoxville purchased the site as part of a flood control project, and residents of the Fairmont Emerald Neighborhood Association took hold of this and decided that they wanted to take ownership of it and do something with it to make it a community asset instead of an eyesore. And so since 2019, they have been applying for the Neighborhood Small Grants Program, and every year they've gotten a few $1,000s every year to make some pretty fantastic improvements. This is Arlington Garden now. This is all walkable to the neighborhood. They've used our funds to purchase plants, to purchase park benches. I've also heard that this is also used as a memorial garden for neighbors who have passed away. There's some signage dedicated to the family who used to live in this space before it was, I guess, torn down. I don't really remember that detail, but this is an incredible space that's used all the time by neighbors. They do ice cream socials here, birthday parties, baby showers, anything that you can imagine. They've done that in this space. Here's the signage that was dedicated to the family that used to live here. And then the neighborhood helps maintain this garden. Lots of partnerships were developed. Parks and Rec has been great to work with. Native Plant Rescue Squad donated a lot of plants. So there were a lot of partnerships that were developed through this continued project. But this is a great example of how just focusing on just a little bit at a time can really make a difference in a space. And that's my presentation. So thank you all so much. Sorry for the technical difficulties. But reach out to me if you're interested in any of the grant funding.
Thank you, Haley. That was amazing. So you heard Haley say, Katie's coming up for slides. Thank you, Katie. You heard Haley say that like each of us is the expert in our own community. So you know best about the place where you live, play, learn, worship. And if you're working on a space, go to the people in proximity to that space, and they are the experts. So you can tap into them. And the other thing that I heard, which I really loved, and from a lot of the examples, are how little things can activate change. You know, there's this Neighborhood Small Grants Program, but I heard you mention that little bit of activity inspired a city partner to come in and help, and inspired a local NGO or a nonprofit partner to come in and help. So it's never a one and done thing. It's always, I can do a little bit, or we can do a little bit more together, and activity inspires activity. So keep thinking about that. As our next presenter comes up, Carol Coletta is here from Memphis. I got to meet her this morning. I'm stoked that she is here. She's spent a lifetime championing public life, the joy it creates, and the community it forges. She's a fellow with the Bloomberg Center for Public Innovation at Johns Hopkins University. And right now she is exploring how public space can foster social connections to achieve more opportunity-rich and unified communities. So how place is actually helping to grow these things. So I'm stoked to hear this. Please give it up for Carol and enjoy.
Thanks, Ben. Oh, hello, Knoxville. It's a great room. I love it. Closer? You're closer. I like it. Haley, thanks for being the technology tester. I appreciate it. And Ben, you and I might have to go toe-to-toe on the notion of resident, or the people closest, the people who use the place know the place best and know the place best for its future. We can talk about that. It's as if everybody agrees. Not true. How many of you built something where there was a little contentiousness around what you built? I have the bullet holes to prove it. Anyway, I'm delighted to be here. And you know more about Knoxville than I will ever know. You are the experts on Knoxville. So I'm not going to try to tell you much about, Knoxville, sorry. Our Jane and I had a conversation yesterday. Knoxville or Knoxville? Do we want to vote? Okay, well, anyway, I'm not going to get in the middle of a local argument, but what I want to talk to you about is my own experience and what we've done. And I want I want to set this notion of placemaking. You're going to hear from some fabulous presenters today. So I got a little peek at what they're going to tell you, and got a chance to talk to them. So you're going to hear all about placemaking. I'm not going to talk about placemaking per se. I want to talk about an idea that I think needs to inform placemaking, planning, development, architecture, landscape architecture, and it's this notion of closer. I grew up in a little fieldstone house. That's me with a very dead duck that my father shot. But I grew up in this little neighborhood, fieldstone houses, in what I now think of as this idyllic neighborhood in South Memphis. And yes, in Memphis, South probably means what it means in most cities. Sort of, lower middle class, that's the way it is. So we have this 2-bedroom, bath and a half home. I guess we lived with a lot less then. That had to include my dad, my mom, my older brother, my younger sister, and me. It was a house full. So I don't know, maybe that's the reason I spent so much time in the neighborhood, or maybe spending time in the neighborhood is just what we did back then. Around the corner, literally steps around the corner, we had a small library, we had a grocery store, a movie theater, a drugstore, a laundry, a salon. It was really, and by the time I was 7, that's me at the Big Star, I could navigate my own way to all of those places, which is it was a gift that I didn't know I had at the time. Just beyond that, our little single family homes were several blocks of brick apartments where our resident pro wrestler lived. I'll come back to that. Occasionally he would show up on Saturdays at the Big Star to sign autographs, which was pretty cool. My school was within easy walking distance of home, even when we didn't take the shortcut across the railroad tracks. And my mom and dad were active in the school's booster club, and I still remember the spaghetti dinners and the pancake breakfast that they would produce, and literally everybody in the neighborhood was there. And sometimes I think I've been trying to recreate my life in South Memphis all my life. I didn't know what to call it then, but public life in Longview Heights was robust. We knew our neighbors, we didn't fear strangers, and we practiced citizenship. In other words, we were closer. Not because we all agreed, Ben, not because we lived identical lives, but because our daily routines kept bringing us into contact with one another. So only later did I realize that what I remembered so fondly wasn't an accident. It was infrastructure. It was intentional social infrastructure. Public life didn't happen because people were nicer then. It happened because the neighborhood made it easier to be together and harder to stay apart. The library, the grocery store, the walk to school, the booster club dinners, they weren't just amenities. They formed a system of encounter. They really shortened the distance between people who might otherwise never have met. They produced what social scientists now call weak ties, those everyday low-stakes connections with people we don't know well, but who expand our sense of who belongs in the space. Really critical. Weak ties, Bob Putnam did the work around weak ties, Mark Granovetter earlier. Weak ties are also known as bridging capital, and they're a critical part of what we talk about when we talk about social capital. Most of what creative placemaking and public spaces enabling or fostering social connections, it's really not about bonding capital. It's about the close, intimate ties. It's about bridging the very small stakes relationships. Weak ties are not trivial. They're how trust travels, and they're how opportunity circulates, and they're how strangers stop feeling strange. As I said, the other kind of social capital is bonding capital. You're familiar with bonding capital. Families bond, friends bond, communities bond. Bonding gives us safety, identity, and care. And this is critical for us to understand with all the talk about loneliness and mental health and community resilience and all of that I believe in and praise and, amen. We need bonding capital. But bonding capital alone is not enough to sustain a city, and it's certainly not enough to sustain a democracy. What Longview Heights offered, my little neighborhood, often without naming it, was bridging. Regular, ordinary contact among difference, across age, across income, and across background. Now, race was the glaring exception, and it still vexes us in America today. But it's interesting to note that 50 years ago, 50 years using that as a marker, we live in America generally more racially integrated than we did 50 years ago, but we live in more income segregated ways than we did 50 years ago. And this is a problem that is rarely named in America. We still think race is an issue because it is. And I live in a predominantly black city, in a predominantly black county, in a metro area where the largest demographic is African American. And we were talking about this yesterday, we know from research that our city is 22% discounted in its value, its real estate value, right off the top, because we are predominantly black in a racist America. So, however, income, again, I think race so predominates when we talk about difference, demographic difference, we fail to focus on the importance of income. And did any of you see the column 2 days ago, I think in the New York Times, on Raj Chetty's new work? I don't know if you saw it. If you didn't and you care about this issue, you should look it up. Because essentially, Raj Chetty, economist at Harvard, and his team, Opportunity Insights, believes and asserts, based on massive big data, research based on massive big data, that the single most important factor for moving people out of poverty essentially is having weak ties, relationships with people with more income. And we all can imagine why that is. So who said it? Who said it this morning? If you haven't seen it, you don't know what it looks like, right? You can't want it if you hadn't seen it. And I think that if you don't have the weak tie, you can imagine something. Maybe your imagination is big enough, that you can see a goal. We talked about this yesterday. But if you don't have the ties to get there, to figure out the pathway, you can't get there. And in America, zip code is destiny. Very few people are able to get out of poverty who grow up in a poor zip code. So I would say, as you think about your placemaking efforts, I just want to encourage you to think you're probably working at a neighborhood level, and generally speaking, at a neighborhood level, we're talking about people of the same income. right? So that is what we would call a haven, right? If you know the hubs, havens, and hangout work that Gail just did on trying to categorize places and public spaces. Havens are those places where we bring our full selves, and we need those places. So the work in neighborhoods is great, but we also need hubs. We need places where people of difference come together and they can all feel. It's funny. I'll show you a park later that we built. But we went back to talk to, we were getting majorly pushback about building a big canopy structure in the middle of a new park we were building. And we were going to have basketball in the park. And ooh, basketball. Ooh, basketball. Who plays basketball? Ooh, young black men play basketball. Is that safe? So it was interesting. We went to talk to, basketball is a big deal in Memphis, if you don't know. And so we went to talk to a lot of former players with the University of Memphis, basketball players, about how they grew up and how they played, where they learned to play. And they said, yeah, we learned to play in the neighborhood. If you showed up and you weren't from our neighborhood, there were going to be problems. There were going to be fights. So, we played in the neighborhood. But wow, wouldn't it be great to have a place where it's nobody's neighborhood? Which really is like counterintuitive for all of us placemakers. Like we like community, we like neighborhoods. Yes, I do too. But we also need hubs where people of difference can come together. And I would say we need alluring hubs so the rich people can't build it in their backyards and poor people will think it's Disneyland. So that's another story, but I'll show you what we did. So with all of that, let's see what we've got here. Yeah. So I will say that, bridging capital that we so desperately need, it doesn't just happen, especially since we've made it so easy to segregate ourselves from those who are unlike us. If we're going to gain bridging capital, it has to be designed into daily life. And so closer doesn't mean deeper intimacy with the same people. It really means a shorter distance between people who are different. Shorter distance between people who are different. So somewhere along the way, we stopped building those kinds of places. Anybody know Gil Penalosa? If you're not into Gil and you're into placemaking and keeping Knoxville beautiful, you need to know Gil. About every 2 weeks, he does a free webinar with great places from around the world. And he likes to say, we want to make everything we want to get people to do, we just need to make it easier. And that to me is this sentiment. We just have to make it easier for people to be closer to people who are different from each other. And as I say, we've fundamentally stopped building places like that. We've separated, the places we live from the places we work and the places we gather. We optimize for speed and efficiency. John and I were talking about that earlier. We replaced shared places with private ones. And as physical distance grew, so did social distance. We didn't just lose friendliness, we lost the daily rehearsal of coexistence. We lost the places we're bridging without anyone calling it that. We lost the weak ties that are so critical to upward mobility and trust. And I talked about the upward mobility, that Raj Chetty's work points to. We lost the low stakes encounters that quietly teach us how to live together. Today, we ask people to overcome their fear and their polarization and mistrust, but we no longer give them places to practice that, to practice how to do it, to learn how to do it. That's why I think public life feels so fragile today. Not because people don't care, but because the systems that once kept us closer have been dismantled. We're asking people to do heroic things in places that no longer support ordinary connection. So, one story from Longview Heights illustrates, I think, what's possible when someone refuses to accept that difference. And of all things, it's a story about a pro wrestler. In the late 50s, pro wrestling was one of the great civic gatherings in the city. Thousands of people came regularly for matches in our civic auditorium. And like so many places at the time, the civic auditorium was segregated. Black fans had to sit, they were forced to sit way up high in the balcony. The wrestling circuit's most popular wrestler was this guy. Not the one tossed upside down, but the one doing the tossing. His name was Sputnik Monroe. And he's the guy who lived a few blocks from me, who used to show up in at the Big Star. Well, this guy, he was like super popular. And he finally refused to perform unless his fans could sit wherever they wanted to. He didn't argue theory. He didn't wait for permission. He changed the rules of gathering. Promoters resisted, elected officials resisted, but Sputnik had the leverage and he just used it. The seats were opened. Not because everyone, suddenly agreed, not because hearts were instantly changed, but because a guy named Sputnik refused to accept the price, distance as the price of public life, which I love. And, what he understood long before we had the language for it, is that civic courage, which I think each of you in this room is being called to, civic courage, can shorten distance. I think one of the mistakes we make when we talk about public life is assuming that it emerges on its own. It doesn't. It's not self-executing. It depends on people who quietly shape the conditions for encounter. Every place that works, I believe, has someone who is doing this work, whether they're named or not. It might be the librarian who notices someone feeling hesitant to enter and who doesn't. A park staff member who understands sort of when to step in to the argument on the basketball court and when to step back. A volunteer who remembers names and makes introductions. A market manager who knows how to, which tables to place near other ones. Those are not soft skills. They're not soft roles. They are civic roles. And they are the difference, in my experience, between a place that looks open and a place that feels open. And I'm glad we do, we invest heavily in capital. That's a good thing. I believe in it. But then we underinvest in the human systems that make those places come alive. We assume that good design will do the work alone, and it won't. Design creates the possibility of public life, but people make it real. And I think that was the point, Haley, you were making, and Ben, you were making. Who are we designing for? We're designing for people. When public life has somebody who's paying attention to who arrives early, who arrives easily, and who hesitates, someone who's lowered the social threshold, someone who has made belonging legible, that's when public life works. And it's why rebuilding public life is not just a design challenge, it's an operations challenge. It requires stewardship and consistency and care. And it requires all of us, I think, to value this work as essential civic infrastructure and not as an afterthought. We think a lot about what we're going to build. We don't think as much about how it's going to operate and how it will be maintained, and how it will be brought to life. We have to think about all of those at once. So I believe if we want stronger civic life today, and God knows we need it, the goal isn't harmony, it is proximity. That means that places that mix people across income and background, programming that invites participation, not just observation, not just spectacle, right? It needs hosts and ambassadors who lower the social threshold, and institutions like the one I ran need to see themselves not just as service providers, but as conveners. And I love the fact that Lizzie began, we are conveners. Elizabeth and I talked about, you are a convener. And I think as we manage these spaces and build our creative places, we need to think of ourselves as conveners. Because public life just doesn't emerge automatically. It depends on the places and the routines we build every day. And that requires investment, both in the places and in the human work of welcoming. We've gotten very good at measuring growth. We want to measure everything. But, I think we need to be looking at how humans use places. Are people lingering? Do they talk to strangers? Do they return, not out of obligation, but because they feel connected? These aren't soft outcomes. They are the foundations of trust and opportunity and resilience. Closer is visible. You can see it, you can feel it, and when it's gone, you know exactly what's missing. So the reason I do the work that I do at the Bloomberg Center for Public Innovation and with our new podcast that we're about to launch called Closer is really simple. Across cities and institutions and communities, I keep encountering the same longing. It's the longing that brought you here today. It's people want places that make connection easier. We use a lot of words for connection. We use thriving, robust, activated. It's not a great word. Activated. It's really about making connection easier. And I think if you use that as your North Star, you'll get to where you want to be. I think they want to make, they want places where connection's easier. They want public life back. Again, not as spectacle, not as episodic, but as everyday, as practice. They want to be closer to each other, not just physically, but socially. And it's a hard trick to pull off. Someone who shaped my thinking over the years on this is an artist in Chicago named Theaster Gates. Do any of you know Theaster's work? Yeah, not too many. Okay, so go look up his work. Theaster Gates, he's a multi-talented artist, but he's a social practice artist as well. And I've worked with him over many decades, and he's basically taken a South Side Chicago, depressed neighborhood, very depressed neighborhood, Dorchester, and has taken it building by building, starting with houses, then, a abandoned bank, all these abandoned and deteriorated buildings and lots, and turn them into something really wonderful. And I like I said, I've worked with Theaster for decades. And this was when he was much younger. And I had the opportunity to hear Theaster at the new Bloomberg Center for Johns Hopkins last month. And I'm always wowed again by Theaster, and he has this very profound way of talking about his artistic practice, which really is social practice as well, and civic practice. And he said in this lecture, he said, I take other people's problems and I turn them into other people's joys. I turn things from nuisance to presence, from burden to gift. And if you know his work, what he's talking about is he actually works with people, with things, with buildings, and with neighborhoods that have all effectively been discarded, completely devalued. They are nuisances. And with his artist creativity, manages to turn them into something very desirable. And he went on to say, he took, for instance, the Johnson Publishing Collection. They had to vacate their building. They didn't know what they were going to do with this marvelous collection of Jet magazines and so forth. And Theaster took them and made them into something exquisite. He's taken hardware stores that were being shut down, and he said, well, I'll just take the whole thing. The whole thing, everything that's left in the hardware store, yes, and turns them into these incredible exhibitions. And he said, he called, when he was talking about that in his talk, he said, I relieve things from their burdensomeness. And I thought about that, and I thought, how many people, how many buildings, how many neighborhoods do we think of right in our communities as burdens? And what would happen if we brought enough imagination, enough creativity to try to flip that script and think, how do those become assets? Because, if those things are considered burdens on this community, they're burdens that you can collectively carry. If you can imagine them as gifts, as joys. And many people look at the work that Theaster's done on the south side of Chicago and they consider it a miracle. But Theaster will tell you half the miracle is believing the place has life. He said this, the building wasn't dead. What was dead was our capacity to believe. And, the goal of miracles, he said, getting biblical, is to get people to believe. And so, in some ways, you should think about the work that's being, that you're being asked to do, that you're being called to do, as a form of miracle. And the purpose of that miracle, it's to get people together. Yes, it's to make communities look better. But really, it's to get people to believe, in their own agency, in their own capacity, and in the inherent worth of things that we've let decline. I think Theaster's work, to me, what he's calling forward is the same alchemy, turning something that we avoid into something we value. It's not just the work of artists, it is the work of cities. And it's the work of cities, and it's the work of people in this room. It's the work of city leaders. You are the city, and so this is your work to do. How do you create the alchemy, right, that turns burdens into gifts? I think it's that to me is sort of fundamental to the draw of creative placemaking. There we go. So I know a little bit about transforming barren places and how it plays out at the scale of public space. In Memphis, Tom Lee Park sat for years on our riverfront as a place that people passed through, but they rarely stayed. It was quite barren. It had, I think, 6 trees, 31 acres, 6 trees. Memphis is hot, if you hadn't heard that. It was mostly a forgotten space, except for 7 really great days a year when a music festival followed by a barbecue festival occurred. But the rest of the time, it was barren, and it was wholly unimagined. So the transformation we led didn't just make the park more beautiful, but it certainly did that. It made it more valuable socially. The park has won the highest design awards nationally and internationally, and we're really proud of that. But alongside great design, and it is great design, we changed how we brought the park to life. We didn't just maintain it, we did host it. We modeled trust and generosity by treating visitors as neighbors. I mean, our t-shirts, hi neighbor. We were saying right from the beginning, we are equal here. We are neighbors here. We modeled trust and generosity by loaning any equipment that someone would need in a park, and not, rather than posting warnings, we programmed for participation every single day, not spectacle. And we paid really close attention to civility, because without it, generosity collapses. And I probably don't have to say that in this room, but when you're running public space, a big public space, and your goal is to run a hub to get lots of different people together, you have to always remember it's about safety, yes, safety first, but civility is also critical, because what you want to do is keep people who don't have to be there, who have lots of options about where they can be. You want them to be in the space. In the first year, the park hosted more than 1 million visitors. And the great thing is that its demographics very closely mirrored those of the city, almost perfectly, in fact. But this is my favorite stat of all. 64% said they met someone new in the park. And I will tell you, this is not accidental. We started with the notion that we would design, we would locate. We felt like we had a neutral location, right? No one's neighborhood, everyone's neighborhood. Riverfront for all. And so we had the location, we designed for closeness among difference. We designed for it, we had a program for it, we then managed for it, and we ran our programming for it. So everything was tied to that, and I'm so proud. That's probably the stat I love best. And it shows that it can be done. That's the most important thing, because we were mirroring a very income segregated city and a racially very diverse city. But 64% of them were meeting someone new, which meant they were meeting people across those differences, and I'm proud of that. What was once barren became desirable, and what was overlooked became shared. People from all walks of life didn't come because they were trying to make some moral statement, to join public life with people who didn't look like them and didn't have the same income, weren't the same age. They came because the place really was irresistible. And Tom Lee wasn't just a one-off. We did the same thing 5 years ago in a much smaller riverfront park that we renamed River Garden. That's an overview of Tom Lee, by the way. And this River Garden had former Confederate associations. It was named Jefferson Davis Park. It was a little jewel that we recaptured from its Confederate past. And its Confederate past of the 50s. That's when it was named. True story. And we introduced generous natural landscaping that is just thriving, teaching Memphians that actually there is a winter season and winter is just fine. Things do grow and, are important in the winter. We introduced generous landscaping, natural landscaping that is thriving, small pavilion, movable chairs, and tables, a very cool climbing structure. And photos of this park, it's funny, they pop up in the most surprising places. The latest one is the new website of City Parks Alliance, right on the front page. And it's a beauty, but more importantly, it has consistently since we redid it, it has become more and more diverse with people from 44 different zip codes using the space on a regular basis. But Memphis doesn't know this, but Memphis we have just begun on the riverfront. I'm now no longer with the partnership. I've been gone a year. But there is so much to do connecting the riverfront north-south, the way the river runs, but also east-west back into the city. There are hurdles to do that, just like there are here in Knoxville. All I have to do is look at a map and see, there's expressway things going on. Oh, okay. So separation is what we have, and we have to keep working and working, because it is not enough to build objects. It's not enough to build projects. You have to join them up, right? You've got to join them up. It's the whole that makes these projects, that leverages what you want to happen in these projects that you build. The leverage comes from connectivity, not the thing you build. I mean, the thing you build is really important, but you got to connect it to everything. And then you've got to make it social. So all of that is super important. So look, I just want to say the work of getting closer, it isn't abstract. It can be beautiful landscaping, as I said, that lures people to a place, that lets them experience the changing seasons. It can be tables and chairs set in a public place. It can even be a kind hello to a stranger, a door held open, a rule that is very quietly enforced so that everyone can feel comfortable in the space. Closer is the result of design, including planning, of courage, and of choice. I didn't grow up in a perfect neighborhood, but I grew up in a neighborhood that kept people close enough to matter. Today, I think the work before us is not to recreate the past. Nostalgia is not a strategy. As someone very famously said at Davos a couple of weeks ago, but it is to shorten this distance we've allowed to grow between us. That takes civic courage, the courage to design places that invite encounter, the courage to invest in connection before crisis, and the connection, each of us as individuals, to show up, to say hello, to make room. Public life doesn't rebuild itself. It's rebuilt by people who decide that being closer to neighbors, to strangers, to shared responsibility is worth the effort. So the future of our cities is not going to be determined, it won't be determined by only what we build, but by how we choose to live together in what we build. I think the question before us, it's simple, but it's really demanding. And that is, are we willing to rebuild public life on purpose and get closer to one another again? I believe we are. I've seen it. And I believe the work starts now, right here in this room. And it starts in the places we steward, the welcomes we individually extend with our projects, and the distance we refuse to accept. So I thank you very much for being here, for the work you've done, for the work you will do. I'll invite any questions that you may have about the work that we've done in Memphis, or that I've seen around the country, around the world. and happy to take a few questions before we have to end in 14 minutes. Yes.
Oh, 2 questions. What was the
Could you stand up? Do you mind?
Sure. What was the name of the reporter that you referenced that wrote the article in the New York Times, #1?
Yeah, it's Raj Chetty is the economist who did the work. Rajchetty. You can look him up and
I've got it.
yeah.
Thank you. And the other question I had was, how do you go about promoting civility in public spaces?
Such a good question. I think that's a question for all of us. We had, I will say, I had a remarkable team of people who were of the community and who did a really good job for us. They would do it frequently. They were always watching. This, phone cannot be in sight, people. You need to be watching and sensing what's going on. Speak to everyone so you set the tone. Someone is watching, but in a really super friendly way. Hey, glad you're in the park today. We've got equipment on loan. Anything you want to do, we've probably got it. Basketball games are casual. You can also, believe it or not, play pickleball over there, so do that. Don't forget to get to the end of. We were always talking to visitors. Our staff set the tone, including our sanitation workers, right? I was a sanitation worker, essentially. We all picked up garbage. We all demonstrated our respect of the place, and part of our job, everybody's job, was to speak to people. Compliment their dog, compliment their kid, whatever. Complain about the weather. But we also would try, when we had to intervene, we would try to intervene in a positive way. And I'm going to give you an example because I learned a lot from my staff on this. I'm like the old witch, I was. I don't say that. That's the record in my head. But because I hate for anyone to mess up public space. But she would say, "Hey man, I don't want to kill your vibe. We didn't allow smoking in the park," which I know is anyway. We didn't allow smoking in the park. And so if someone was smoking, especially weed, because it smells, I can't believe we traded cigarette smoke for weed. I mean, the smell of cigarettes now is like much better. And for me, I know everybody in this room won't agree, but the old lady, see the record in my head. But she'd say, "Hey man, I don't want to kill your vibe, but we don't smoke here because we got children. So I tell you what, why don't you finish whatever you're smoking outside the park? Just go outside the park and finish it up. And then when you're finished, come on back in." So it was always, trying to divert people to say something good about, say something, "I don't want to kill your vibe," like, "Oh, it's on me, but, we've got this rule, but do this instead and then come back." So we really tried. We did not have police in the park. It took us a while to get the police familiar enough with the culture. We finally got a really good head of our precinct who got what we were doing and began to respect that, where they would not bring police cars in the park. If they walked through, they would try to play, a round of basketball or shoot a few hoops. Anything to make them feel part of the community. It was much more like community policing when they did come through, but they were rarely there. But when we called, they would come. It helped the mix of our staff and the lived experiences of our staff helped a lot. And at one point, there's a climbing gym in South Memphis that is very income diverse. And we ended up getting a lot of those kids, young men, working with us as part-timers, and they did a spectacular job because they knew how to manage that kind of mixed audience. So I think in a lot of ways it comes down to respecting people, but having a set of firm rules and always trying to enforce them. Yes, and then I'll go here.
When you began your talk, you referred to your
sensibilities, I think your way of looking at the world has formed in the weak ties that were generated from proximity, which is something that has, that's something, I don't know if you want to recreate it, but it's something you want to, well, anyway, you take value from. What happens when the memory of that doesn't exist?
Well, I think you are asking the question I'm asking, and I mean, the way you put it, sounds an alarm for me. And it should sound an alarm for all of us. But I think that's why public space, I mean, you've got to figure out, here's the thing. This used to happen more naturally in neighborhoods, doesn't anymore, because we live in income segregated ways. Therefore, it typically does not happen in schools. So
The extension of metropolitan areas is becoming basically
No. I get it. And so I think that's, so two responses. One, I think public space can play an enormously valuable role. It's not the only thing. I think actually sports stadia do that same thing where they bring people across class. But, like, I always wonder how it is that I can wear a Grizzlies t-shirt and a, young 18-year-old black man can wear a Grizzlies t-shirt, and how I don't devalue the brand for him. But anyway, that's another story. I think a lot about that. But it's like, I don't want to wear the same t-shirt that all white lady's wearing. But I do believe that's why it makes me crazy when people worry about, it's downtowns versus neighborhoods. Oh, heck no. Downtown, you need those places that transcend any one group's neighborhoods, and your best bet on that is downtown. So, and I believe it's one of the reasons, and I believe in allure. You're not going to goad people or moralize people into being with people they don't want to be with, right, or not part of their tribe. So I think alluring places, and I'll go back, places that you can't build in your backyard are really important for attracting people across distance and across differences. However, just one more thing I want to say is that, and so you should never, ever, ever apologize for building alluring, beautiful places, and places of awe. There's a new Cities of Awe lab that's coming on that is going to be exciting. But you wanted to say something else, and we'll let you say one more thing, and there was a question over here somewhere. But go ahead. You wanted to say something else.
So without the neighborhoods, without the weak ties and social bonds, due to proximity of stores, etc.
Right.
That's pretty well gone. So public spaces are what's left to have some kind of life. That's
Yeah.
I think you're saying.
Yeah, and I hope, but we need to we need to build those places with more ambition and more intentionality, and we need to build more of them. And I know you're doing that in Knoxville, so bravo to you. Was there a question over here?
I was just curious about how many staff you had at your park. You kept talking about your staff. How many people does it take to run a park?
We didn't have a lot of people. We had, on our team, we had about 30 people, and we took care of 5 miles of riverfront. On a Mississippi River that rises and falls 40 to 50 feet a year, which means in the spring, you discover many things that Ohioans have discarded, like refrigerators, and you wouldn't believe. You had a question.
Yes. First of all, thank you for Tom Lee Park. I actually dated Will TJ's older sister in college and encouraged him to be a landscape architect. So you're welcome. If you haven't stopped and seen the park, it's, I think, just voted the 3rd best park in the country, if I'm not mistaken. What I'm asking, and I'm not casting shade on anybody in the room, because I know there's a handful of people in here that are dealing with this. I'm a landscape architect, dealing with public input meetings, streetscapes, park improvements on a regular basis. And what I'm curious about is how do you combat the Strava data? So there's kind of an example very close to here. I live in North Knox, about 2 blocks from the park that was mentioned earlier. Central, bike lanes, streetscape, trees, furnishings, Broadway, homeless people walking every day, tons of pedestrian activity. They're just not keeping track of it on their smartwatch. How do you enable sort of spaces like, under the interstate? You mentioned the interstate passing. Every day I drive to the Y and I cross what feels like this war zone of a hub that's sort of happening because it has to. Yet the design, no offense to anyone, the design, the spaces are just brutal. Like every time I slow down to like 2 miles an hour so I don't run over somebody, there's nothing to encourage you to slow down. How do you speak for those who aren't capable of speaking for themselves? I think would be a way to summarize that.
Yeah, that's,
Sorry, it's a lot.
No, let me just give you one story from my life. And it's funny because I think Ben referred to people being, we need to wrap up, but Ben referred to, I think, the people, listening to the people, or maybe, I can't remember, one of you, mentioned the users of the space. Listen to the users of the space. You got to also listen to the people who aren't using the space. And we had a very interesting dilemma in Tomley Park because it was a barren park, and the people who had a voice were the people who organized the 7 days of festivals. And they were loud, and they were vociferous. And to believe them means you believe I have an offshore account somewhere because I've lined my pockets, and I'm still trying to find that offshore account. But that was the nicest thing they said about me. But what we finally, don't do anything to this park. We use this park. We control. I thought, okay, and this is, I won't tell you the real war story. But so I finally said, maybe we've got it all wrong. So we went out and did a statistically valid poll like a politician would do. And it turned out that there was wild enthusiasm for what we were trying to build, but those people were never going to show up at a city council meeting. They weren't going to, they didn't have a watch, right? They were not being counted. And the most enthusiastic people, we did a statistically valid across the city, because that's who we were trying to influence. We wanted to understand what city residents thought. And then we overcounted in the distressed zip codes. We've got 7 very distressed zip codes within walking distance, essentially, of this park. And it turned out the most enthusiastic people for the park were young people, because this is about our future, right? They could see a future. They weren't looking at the past. Young people, women, and particularly the people who lived in those 7 zip codes, which is not surprising. It's like, hey, we're getting something good near us. But how it was very hard to give them voice, because in today's world, city council members look at social media, and you present them a poll, and it's like, oh, here's the community voice, not just who shows up at your meetings. And the frustrating thing is, it was very hard to get council members to take that poll in consideration, because they were still getting the calls from these people who had over the years given them free tickets and given them free barbecue tent and so you're competing with that. So I do think you have to look at who's not using the space and why, or who's using the space but whose voices aren't being heard. You know, they're not going to be the people who come to a meeting. They got to get their kids up in the morning and get them off to school, if they still go, and and make dinner at night, and they're tired, and then I come to your meeting. So anyway, okay, I think we need a happier note. What's a happy note? Somebody ask me say something happy, Ben. You're the moderator.
I'll say something.
Come on, you can say something happy.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Oh, yeah, thank you. I have to take a picture of you guys, or they don't believe at Bloomberg I've been here.
Okay.
I don't know why they communicate with, anyway, they always want a photograph. So here, I'm going to go here, and I want everybody to smile.
Wait.
But I really need somebody who's tall and got a long arm.
Who's tall?
Okay, so I need to be here, and then y'all need to be here.
Okay, first off, I want everyone
But y'all
to
don't
give
get
a
it.
rousing applause for this. Holy sh... there's the thing I threw on the ground earlier. Holy shit! I am emotional. I grew up outside of Memphis, and I haven't been to Tom Lee Park in 20 years. I had no idea. I used to go to Tom Lee Park for two different things. I would go for Memphis in May, for the barbecue and the music festival, and then I would go to get in trouble because there was no one there. So, like, you could just go and you would be invisible, because it was totally empty. I am speechless. I forgot to tell you guys that Carol was, named one of the top 100 urbanists in the world, and that she won like the most prestigious award for Tom Lee Park, and that she ran the Memphis River Parks Partnership. But of course, you know that work was incredible. So we're leaving. We're about to go on a break. As you go on a break, bathrooms are out there. Water's over there. When you come back, Dustin from Yes Knoxville is gonna talk to us. But listen to what Carol was saying, that our job in placemaking is getting people to believe in something collectively, and that we can build social infrastructure that fosters bridge capital, like weak ties. I love that the stranger's no longer strange, that we can make connection easier. So go to the bathroom. We're going to come back here in about 8 to 10 minutes. But everybody up, give Carol another round of applause as you get up. Thank you so much.